What up, vigilantes? Just here, another day, getting ready for the next quarantine for the macaroni virus. And I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone's prepared, and I hope everyone is taking advantage of these amazing prices in the crypto markets. Yep, whether you realize it or not, you are still an early adopter. So today I want to talk to you guys about some very important topics regarding crypto, especially now that we're moving more and more into a bull rally. And I kind of want to take you guys back to the basics, keep things simple, because there's a lot of confusion out there, and every single time that there's a bull run, usually it's triggered by some new fad in crypto. Last time we had the ICO fad, and never really was a fan of it. The vast majority of the team wasn't really a fan of it either. So right now I would like to talk to you guys and take you into the world of the Nakamoto consensus. And what the heck is the Nakamoto consensus? So it happens that everyone in crypto talks about the Nakamoto consensus, and very few actually understand what it is. So let's break it down. The Nakamoto consensus has been misunderstood, and it's probably the most misunderstood concept in all of crypto. I am a big believer that the best way to clear out the BS when we talk about these things is to look at, it's always to defer back to the market and not to someone's personal opinion. So we're in the position now where it's important to look at the market to see what the market has to say about cryptocurrency, and to rethink what Satoshi created. So as you guys know, I am unapologetically a big blocker. I was more in line with Mike Hearn back in the day, and his ideas as to what was possible within Bitcoin. I am and I always have been a big believer that everything that Vitalik and Ethereum have been wanting to implement on their own blockchain, on the Ethereum blockchain, I always thought it possible in the Bitcoin blockchain itself. And some people in crypto don't realize that many of the opcodes within Bitcoin were disabled back in the early days. A lot of people don't realize that the scaling war that we had in Bitcoin, which divided us essentially into two different camps, was primarily led by ideas on not just what the technology is capable of, but what the purpose of the technology is. So let's start with this very simple breakdown of to get into the meat of this. And we either have the option of having a blockchain, or any blockchain, that is purpose driven or market driven. Now, the main question is for you guys is, and I think this is something that we can all ask ourselves rhetorically, what is more important? Is it more important to have a blockchain that its governance comes forth from the demand of the market itself? Or is it more libertarian per se to have a libertarian driven, purpose driven blockchain? And we're going to look at some examples to drive these points more for you guys, so that you guys understand where I'm coming from with this. So Vitalik originally wanted to create what he created in his team. What they created on the Ethereum blockchain, they actually wanted to create it on the Bitcoin blockchain. And I think that that's what really started the scaling debate, because of this purpose-driven mentality of this faction thinks that the purpose for this blockchain is XYZ. And so when you have different factions warring as to what the purpose of the blockchain is, we end up dealing with the same BS we've always been dealing, politics. I don't think that that's what Satoshi wanted. So I'll give you my take on the Nakamoto consensus. And it has to do with mining and Bitcoin mining. I think that miners are the ones who are economically driven to do what's best for the chain. And why is that? Because miners are the entities, the investors that have the most to lose. Let me explain. If you are a holder of the coin, a hodler, and something were to happen to the market, you could short your way out of the market. If you have a business or a startup in crypto, you can pivot to something else in fintech. But the miners are those who are invested in computers that are created and that were created for the sole purpose of mining Bitcoin, the Bitcoin protocol, SHA-256. The SHA-256 algorithm. So we're talking about a design embedded within not just the Bitcoin technology, but within the Bitcoin economic structure and the game theory in Bitcoin itself, where those who have the most to lose, again, the miners, those whose incentive is to protect the network, these capitalists would know what is best for the network, at least in theory, right? But honestly, I think that theory is not really a theory. I think it's praxeologically sound. I had this conversation with Fluffy Pony, and I was criticizing the whole notion of having a purpose-driven blockchain. And I told him jokingly, hey, so are you for having central planners for the sake of decentralization? And he laughed and he's like, yeah, because miners could have a disincentive and hurt the network for profit. So in his example, and this is kind of like what you always get from someone who is for a purpose-driven blockchain, is that miners could be at odds with what is best for the network. Be that as it may be, anything a miner does affects their well-being. So even if a miner were to act against the best, even if a miner were to act against the what is best for the Bitcoin network, that miner will still be acting suicidal. So yes, Fluffy Pony's right. Miners could have disincentives. That is definitely a reality. A miner could say, you know what, I want to get out of this business. I'm going to try to attack the blockchain as much as I can to make as much profit as possible. But ultimately that action of that miner is suicidal. And that there's no going around that reality. That's just the honest truth. So a purpose-driven blockchain is something that will always be centrally controlled or centrally planned. When we talk about consensus, and in crypto, we've had many people throughout the years talk about, hey, but we reached this agreement because of consensus. And to this day, guys, I honestly have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Is consensus something that you reach via some poll on Twitter? Is this some social media poll that I don't know about? Because there is no consensus. And how many people are you polling? Who's making this decision for who? Right? So it literally becomes central planning. The word consensus means central planning. And whenever you have someone in crypto, and I'm going to drop some truth bombs here, vouching for consensus for the sake of XYZ, decentralization, equality, to me it sounds a lot like socialism. And the same BS that we've been hearing our whole life, right? That we need central planners to plan for us for something because they know best. And that's something that I've never agreed with. Now, I can argue for the other, for their perspective, and I can give you a great example as to why that perspective would make so much sense. So, let's talk about Monero, for example. So Monero is a blockchain, and of which its purpose is to be the most fungible private medium of exchange on Earth. And we love Monero, but Monero, because of what we've spoken about just now, the reason that because of it being fungible and private, it has to safeguard its mining. It has to safeguard its crypto governance, because you would not want a competing entity to come into the Monero ecosystem that would challenge or change the design that aims towards fungibility and privacy. So, what is the Nakamoto consensus? Let's define that then, right? I've already explained what is not the Nakamoto consensus, but let's talk about what is the Nakamoto consensus. And well, I see the Nakamoto consensus not defined in technological terms, but rather in economic terms. The Nakamoto consensus itself is capitalism. It's pure free market capitalism, where miners, again, who are those who are most invested in the network, as I explained already, are the same who are incentivized most to secure the network and to do what's best for the network. So mining in itself is driven by the desire for profit. Not just what is profitable for the miner. Again, the miner's profit and well-being is intrinsically tied to the profit and well-being of the entire network. So, the Nakamoto consensus is a capitalist meritocracy of miners, of proof of work miners. So, let's define that term. What the heck is proof of work? Proof of work is a discovery. As many things are in life, it's a beautiful discovery by Satoshi Nakamoto that gave us the means to signal to others within an adversarial network where to best spend our energies in creating an environment where we can compete with adversaries in a space that is censorship resistant, and where there's no one single point of failure. So, proof of work Proof of work has nothing to do with actual money spent, but rather with energy spent that proves to the rest of the network that energy that has been spent for securing the network. And I know it sounds kind of like a tautology what I'm saying here, but proof of work is found in nature, right? You can proselytize yourself and say that you are great at X, Y, and Z, and invest a bunch of money into marketing to try to prove to the world that you're awesome at X, Y, and Z. But nothing beats proof of work. Nothing beats actual demonstrated spent energy that you prove your work to others by showing them that you in fact created this, made this. And so the beauty of this capitalist meritocracy is that now you have competing entities proving to one another who works the best, right? So this is a very simple and like praxeological outlook on free market capitalism itself and the way human beings behave and our motivations for action and for choosing action, and most importantly for choosing with whom to associate with, right, in the market. Remember that civilization, as Ed Bugos has said, actually he quoted Mises, I think, on that, civilization is the idea that we yield more, that we're more profitable, that we can advance more by working together than by working by ourselves, right? So when we are creating a network, a community with one another, it's very important for us to pick out who the real deal guys are and who are the fakes, right? So we live in a world where spent money itself can lead you to believe and to deceive you by marketing, right? By the world of marketing, that given entity is a great entity to associate with, to yield more, right? Alongside with. But that could always be cheated. But you cannot cheat proof of work, right? When, I'm a big fan of Doug Casey, and when he wrote The International Man, that to me was, wow, this guy's not just talking, and he's not just playing by everyone else's tune, but he's a contrarian, right? Doug Casey lived this life. He lived this life that he's talking about, of being an international man. Doug Casey has lived it, and look at it, what he's done with his life. That is, his life is a testament as to who he is, right? His work has been proven, right? And in the market, we can say, yeah, okay, well, Doug Casey indeed has accomplished this, and we will follow him because it's not because of his marketing. It's not because he spent a bunch of money on marketing who he is. No, it's because the dude has proven his work. He has done his work, and he's done it better than others. And so we've been able to associate with one another throughout history by our reputations, right? And now with Bitcoin and with what Satoshi gave us, we have something that is, I think, grandiose, and something that has been missed by most of the people in crypto, in Bitcoin in general. And it's the idea, and it's this idea itself that via this capitalist meritocracy, we can figure out who to associate with, right? Who to associate with over others. Now, think about this. It's something very important. And I was talking to our head of research, Ed Bugos, and he's like, Raph, keep it simple when you talk. And I'm like, yes, I'll do that. And I don't know if I'm keeping it simple, guys, but I'm just keeping it real, right? And if you guys want to get more into it, well, we have the newsletters, right, where we get more into all these topics. And know that my perspective is my perspective because we're free thinkers. But I have Mr. W and Mr. X, and they disagree with me on some of these things. And it's great, right? Jeff disagrees with us on some things, and Ed, everyone has their own opinion, but you know what? We keep constantly challenging one another. So I'm giving you my perspective, and then I'll put on the BTC hat on and the Monero hat and give you their perspective. And then you can have a more well-rounded perspective as to what the heck is the Nakamoto consensus. So when we talk about proof of work is good and necessary so that you're able to figure out with whom to associate with, right? Now we're moving into a world where the internet has allowed us to be connected with one another. Well, how can we trust another party? How can we become part of a network where adversaries are competing with one another, and there's shitty people out there that might be willing to sabotage you, to hurt you, to double spend, to try to take over a blockchain? Well, that's the reason why Satoshi discovered Bitcoin as it is, where the Nakamoto consensus is Byzantine fault tolerant, meaning that you can be in a network with adversaries and everyone is competing for your business to give you as much value as possible. So how do I know who to trust? How do I know who's best? Who's best, right? Well, who's best for me to associate with, right? And the gift of Satoshi is, it's the miners, guys. The miners. Why the miners? Why are the miners so important? The miners are important because they don't put money up at stake. The miners spend energy in creating and in using and in working the most advanced computers in the world in securing that network. Now, when we talk about a network, a blockchain network, you have to understand that the weakest, sounds a little cliche what I'm about to tell you, but a blockchain is only as capable as its strongest node, right? Right? Here's a cliche, right? That a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Well, it applies for crypto as well. So, where is the incentive? Where's the incentive? In any blockchain, when you study any blockchain, ask yourself, where is the incentive for this blockchain to constantly better itself and providing the best service in real time? And by bettering itself, that there is a capitalist, market-driven desire, not just for profit, but for offering the best service out there. I'll give you guys an example. A counterexample. If you look at a proof of stake system, which is what EOS has been trying to do, what Ethereum is promising to do, you'll notice that their emphasis in proof of stake is spending money to be a validator or a block producer. And you have to understand that there is no immediate market feedback in those types of networks. Whereas in the meritocracy of mining, of proof of work, the feedback is given immediately to the network by the energy spent, where those nodes that are closest to those who are providing the most value are the nodes that the rest of the network will follow. If there's a node out there, if there's a miner doing things that are malicious to the network, the blockchain is set to orphan that miner, to do away with it, because it's not good for the network. Or and the rest of the network will constantly be finding ever more better leaders to lead the network, right? So if you are able to mine a block as a miner, and the rest of the network says, indeed, you got the right block and you got the right set of transactions, and everything's been categorized accordingly, which is the word for hash, right? Everything's been hashed accordingly. And all transactions in the past 7 minutes were categorized accordingly, and you've been able to process and do the proof of work best, then the rest of the network will follow you, right? So it's an ongoing capitalist meritocracy where the best performer of the network is trusted by the rest of the network, right? It's beautiful, guys. And now that we're moving into an age where everyone's talking about DeFi this, DeFi that, well, I want you guys to think about this. Think about this. When you guys look for a blockchain in which to build a business, I highly recommend that you keep in mind Bitcoin. I highly suggest that you keep in mind Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin SV. Now, I know that Bitcoin Cash is having a lot of problems with its crypto governance, and it has to do because of what I just explained, right? There's a faction within Bitcoin Cash that wants one thing and a faction that wants another thing. Well, why do we have factions at all, guys? Let's let the miners decide what's best. The initial fork that broke us off from between big blockers and small blockers was for the same reason, right? The BTC crowd really thought that having a user-activated soft fork, in other words, a democratic vote, was enough to move the network, and it did. But know this: miners will choose, and miners will continue to choose. So, before we get into, and I know the comment section is probably gonna blow up for what I'm saying right now, but I don't want to get into it. I will say this, guys. All three of these Bitcoin chains are still united, and let me explain to you how. All of these three Bitcoin chains, before we get into arguments as to who's better, who's right, who's wrong, well, I'll tell you this, guys. I'm a big blocker, and I can sit down and talk to you forever as to why the big blocker design for Bitcoin and following Satoshi's original vision is the way to go. But the truth is that is trite. Who am I to impose that idea on anyone? Let's let the market decide. And when you look at it from that perspective, and you step back and you look at Bitcoin and what Satoshi created from taking into account the Nakamoto consensus, which is what I'm talking to you guys about right now, you will understand and begin to see that these three chains, whether you realize it or not, are still united. And how are they united? Well, these three chains are still governed by the same group of miners. So, the miners call the shots. And miners are agnostic as to what blockchain they mine. So, if I was a miner, I'd love the fact that there's three different factions competing for my business in the future. That's amazing. Why not? I don't see any reason to oppose that. Let the market decide. Cool, we disagreed on a political level, which is, I think, dumb. We should have never disagreed. I think miners, at the beginning of all of this, should have stepped in and intervened, but they did not. And the reason why, guys, is this. Miners did not have an economic incentive during those times in Bitcoin's history, to step in and to decide and to say, no, guys, this is what we're going to do because this is what we know is best for the network because we're the ones securing the network. They didn't do that. Why? There's not an economic incentive. And why wasn't there an economic incentive for them to take a side and be the leaders that they're meant to be? Because they were still receiving their block reward. Some of us like to call that the block reward subsidy because indeed it is a subsidy, right? I've always talked about there being a golden age of Bitcoin mining, which I know is fast approaching. And this is a time when the transaction fees for Bitcoin, for the Bitcoin miners, remember when I talk about Bitcoin, I'm always referring, from now on in this conversation, when I talk about Bitcoin, my definition of Bitcoin, after breaking down the Nakamoto consensus, my definition of Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is a network, a meritocratic network of miners, okay? Which includes all three chains, right? All three chains are in competition for the business of the miners that secure the Bitcoin protocol. So, if you guys are not paying attention because you guys are, and this is a libertarian Austrian anarchist speaking to you, if you're not paying attention to Bitcoin Satoshi vision, I don't know what you're doing in crypto. You have to really think for yourself sometimes. and not let the masses do the thinking for you. That's another topic. But what BSV is doing is pretty freaking incredible. Look at Twitch, Pow Ping, BitPing, Tonic Pow, Kodo, which is pretty much a chain link on the BSV blockchain. Gosh, I can legally chained. I can just keep naming startups. You know, I mean, I don't see. I mean, there's so much innovation happening in BSV using the original Bitcoin protocol, right? Trying to entice the miners with that big blocker vision of what Bitcoin is, right? And so for all the privacy advocates and the privacy advocates, I'll say this. By far, our favorite coin at the Crypto Vigilante is Monero. But if you're going to criticize BSV for its transparency and for its status ways, well, I'll tell you this. Might as well, you know, don't forget to criticize all the other blockchains that are based on the Bitcoin protocol. Don't forget to criticize Ethereum as well. Now, I'm dropping some red pills here, guys, because there's nothing more sad than to see amazing technology be depreciated by the masses who unfortunately have not understand the magnitude of the Nakamoto consensus. So again, screw the marketing, screw everything. Does the technology work? Can you prove the work? Is the work being better done here, better than elsewhere? Ask yourself those questions. And these questions all revolve around the Nakamoto consensus and the philosophy of having a capitalist meritocracy. And you cannot cheat proof of work. There's a beautiful meme, and maybe I'll post it here. And it's Vitalik flexing. It's not really him, but it's a crop of him flexing with a bunch of bodybuilders. And the meme says, you can't cheat proof of work. And yeah, you can't cheat proof of work, guys. It's in nature, it's everywhere. Now, again, proof of work is so freaking good that even the most private medium of exchange, Monero, is based on proof of work. I would call it guided proof of work. It's guided, again, and I explained it earlier, because Monero is purpose driven in being the most private medium of exchange on earth. So I think we are done with this video, and yeah, guys, crypto is amazing, but it's important to remember and to look back at what Satoshi really created for us and really appreciate it from all perspectives. Because if we are only following one crowd, we end up hurting ourselves. So avoid echo chambers. You know, when Jeff Berwick was like, hey Raph, let's get this going, I'm like, well, who's the best man for this? And Mr. X, he doesn't agree with everything that I say or that I just told you guys. He's more of the BTC persuasion, and you know what? I love that. He's mostly a Monero maximalist, but yeah, I love that. I love being challenged. Mr. W actually is also of the more BTC persuasion, which is great, guys. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to dialogue and be open and not be fickle and blocking people that disagree with you. So I just wanted to throw these ideas out there, because the more educated all of our human nodes are, the best we will all be off as we survive this dollar collapse. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Peace. Macaroni virus. Oh yeah, and get out in nature, guys. Get out into nature. Stop falling for these lies, guys. Enjoy your life. Go back to nature.